There is news that Mr. Trump has a detailed plan to resolve the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Russia changed its attack tactics, leaving Ukraine's air defenses unable to react in time. Washington does not support Ukraine using U.S. weapons to attack deep into Russian territory. Russia warns the U.S. about the risk of trade war. There is news that Mr. Trump has a detailed plan to resolve the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Former U.S. President Donald Trump is said to have drawn up a detailed plan to resolve the Russia-Ukraine conflict. The Telegraph newspaper quoted a knowledgeable source as saying on May 3, Mr. Trump has a detailed plan to resolve the Ukraine conflict. However, he will not reveal it at least until Election Day. The source added that Trump will instead focus on a simple message that he will end the war to win over American voters. At the end of April, in an interview with Time magazine, former President Trump announced that if he was elected, the U.S. would cut aid to Ukraine if European countries did not provide adequate aid. Mr. Trump has long opposed the U.S. spending billions of dollars on Ukraine. He also blamed President Joe Biden's administration for the current crisis in Ukraine. He affirmed that if he were still president, the Russia-Ukraine conflict would not have broken out. He also announced that he could resolve this conflict within 24 hours if re-elected. Last month, the Washington Post quoted diplomatic sources saying that the former White House owner wanted to bring Moscow and Kyiv to the negotiating table, pushing them to reach an agreement to end the conflict. According to sources, if Mr. Trump is re-elected, he will likely contact Russian President Vladimir Putin and his Ukrainian counterpart Volodymyr Zelensky immediately after winning or on Inauguration Day. Mr. Trump can use U.S. military aid as a tool to pressure Ukraine. If Ukraine wants continued aid, then they have to sit down and negotiate, and if Russia doesn't want us to provide large amounts of new assistance to Ukraine, then they have to sit down and negotiate. That doesn't mean giving in. The Ukrainian ministry often gives in to all Russian proposals, the source explained. According to some sources, Mr. Trump is hatching a plan to pressure Ukraine to cede part of its territory to reach a peace agreement with Russia. According to this plan, Ukraine may have to give up the Crimea Peninsula and the Donbas region in exchange for an agreement to end the conflict with Russia. However, Mr. Trump's representative denied it. Russia changed its attack tactics, leaving Ukraine's air defenses unable to react in time. Russia in recent weeks has changed its tactics of long-range raids on Ukrainian targets. Spokesperson of the Ukrainian Air Force Ilya Yevlash said that Russia changed its tactics of attacking Ukraine 2 to 3 weeks ago. According to him, Russia has reduced the frequency of using Garand suicide UAVs, Ukraine and the West suspect Shahid is produced by Iran. Instead, Russia has increased its use of reconnaissance UAVs, making it very difficult for Ukrainian air defenses to shoot them down. We see that Russia's tactics have changed a bit. In the last 2 to 3 weeks, they have not used or significantly reduced the number of Shahid-type attack drones. Now Russia has used UAVs reconnaissance to adjust its missile attacks, Mr. Yevlash said. He added that Russia is adjusting its drone firepower to more effectively attack Ukraine with missiles. The Ukrainian Defense Forces are analyzing new Russian tactics and closely monitoring the use of reconnaissance UAVs. According to Mr. Yevlash, reconnaissance drones are much smaller than attack drones, so they are quite difficult to detect and shoot down. The Ukrainian armed forces often use anti-aircraft means to defeat them. Russia has recently increased missile production for use in special military operations in Ukraine. Missiles have complex flight trajectories, so they are more difficult to intercept than attack UAVs. They are also capable of accurately attacking targets with a low error rate. As Russia increases the deployment of reconnaissance UAVs, the coordinates of the target will be more accurate, leading to the missile being able to ensure a more effective attack. Washington does not support Ukraine using U.S. weapons to attack deep into Russian territory. Washington wants to help Ukraine defend itself, but does not support attacks with U.S.-made weapons on Russian territory, U.S. Ambassador Bridget Brink said, although some other NATO allies support the opposite. The first part in helping Ukraine defend itself is to provide our weapons and those of our partners to support the efforts of brave heroes on the front lines to return their territories, the ambassador said. When asked how Ukraine could win the war if the United States limited its attacks on Russian territory, Ms. Brink said that this position had not changed since the beginning of the full-scale invasion. Our position from the beginning has been that we do not authorize or encourage the use of our weapons in Russia, outside of Ukraine. According to Latvian Foreign Minister Baiba Braze, some of Ukraine's allies have sent weapons to Kyiv without limiting attacks on Russian territory. British Foreign Secretary David Cameron said that Ukraine has the right to use weapons provided by London to attack targets inside Russia and that it is up to Kyiv to do so. A series of recent attacks targeting Russia's oil industry has drawn criticism from U.S. officials, who have made it clear that Washington does not support Ukraine's targeting of oil refineries, citing fears that this could threaten global energy markets. Ukraine responded that it considered Russian oil refineries to be legitimate military targets. Ukraine continues to press its Western allies to buy long-range weapons, but some partners are hesitant about supplying weapons that could potentially be used to strike Russian territory. President Volodymyr Zelensky said that Kyiv will not use weapons provided by foreign partners to attack targets outside the country's borders. Such restrictions do not apply to domestically produced weapons, some of which are believed to be capable of striking deep into Russia. At the end of April, the Pentagon said that large amounts of U.S. military aid were arriving in Ukraine after months of delay. Among the first to arrive will be a $1 billion package of weapons and equipment from U.S. stockpiles. This package will increase ammunition, weapons, and equipment to support Ukraine's ability to defend its front lines, defend its cities and defend against persistent attacks, the Pentagon said. Of Russia. Russia warns the U.S. about the risk of trade war. Russia believes that the new sanctions package launched by the U.S. against Moscow is a move of a trade war. This, the U.S. announcing a new anti-Russian sanctions package, is a trade war that is taking place strongly to redistribute the market, to allow the U.S. to maintain its own growth rate. The lack of resources appropriate force pushed them to such aggressive actions, Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova said at a press conference on May 3. Ms. Zakharova said that the new sanctions could be seen as an attempt by the U.S. to maintain a leadership role in the absence of an opportunity to do this legally. On May 1, the U.S. Treasury Department announced a new sanctions package aimed at Russia. The sanctions list includes 29 individuals and more than 250 legal entities from several countries. The U.S. government says the sanctions target Russia's military-industrial complex. In addition, 20 businesses based in Hong Kong and mainland China are also included in the latest U.S. sanctions list. According to the U.S. Treasury Department, the sanctions target businesses and organizations that are believed to be circumventing sanctions to support the Russian defense industry. The U.S. State Department also announced a new round of sanctions targeting Russian entities, citing accusations that Moscow violated the 1993 Chemical Weapons Convention, CWC, to impose a number of sanctions. The sanctioned individuals and entities included the Radiological, Chemical and Biological Defense Forces, a specialized branch of the Russian military tasked with protecting troops and civilians from weapons of mass destruction. Washington accused this unit of facilitating the use of chemical weapons in the Ukraine conflict. The U.S. State Department accused Russia of using chloropicrin, a substance used in chemical warfare during World War I and now mainly used as a pesticide and herbicide. A senior Ukrainian military commander claimed last year that his troops had been repeatedly targeted with chloropicrin. In February, Kyiv accused Russia of conducting more than 200 chemical weapons attacks on the battlefield in January alone. Moscow has accused Ukrainian forces of staging chemical weapons incidents in order to blame Russia for these incidents. The Russian Foreign Ministry in late February alleged that Ukraine's use of toxic chemicals has become systematic. Russia also accused Ukraine of using chemical weapons dropped by drones. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov this week denied U.S. accusations that Russia had used chemical weapons in the Ukraine conflict. Mr. Peskov announced on May 2 that these claims are baseless and without any evidence. Russia said it would continue to comply with its international responsibilities,